In 2018, high in the Andes, at nearly 4,000 meters, a team of archaeologists opened a grave. Inside was a skeleton, and arranged around it, placed there deliberately, was a kit. Stone projectile points, scrapers for cleaning hides, a knife, flakes for cutting, nodules of red ochre. This is not a random pile of rocks. This is the toolkit of somebody who brought down large animals for a living, and it was buried with them because it mattered. The team wrote the obvious conclusion: a big game hunter. Male. Then they tested the teeth. There is a protein in tooth enamel called a melanogin, and it comes in two slightly different versions. One is written on the X chromosome and one on the Y. It survives for thousands of years after the DNA has fallen apart. The enamel came back female. A girl, somewhere between 17 and 19 years old. So the team did something useful. They went back through the published record. 429 burials across the Americas from the same broad period, looking for anyone buried with big game hunting equipment. They found 27. 11 of them were female. Now, be careful with that, because archaeologists still argue about it. Being buried with a tool is not the same as having used it. Grave goods can be gifts, or symbols, or a family's idea of who you were. But hold on to what happened in that room, because it is the actual subject of this video. Nobody lied. Nobody faked anything. A group of careful, well-trained people looked at a hunting kit and saw a man, instantly, without noticing they had decided anything at all. Because we all carry a story about this, and it goes roughly like this. Men hunted. Women gathered. That was the ancient arrangement, and everything since has been a slow correction of it. That story is wrong, and it is wrong in a genuinely interesting way. Not because women were secretly in charge. They were not. It is wrong because the arrangement it describes is not ancient. It is about 10,000 years old. It has a start date, and it does not begin with a body. It begins with a tool. Let us start where the story starts, which is a conference room in Chicago in 1966. 75 anthropologists met for a symposium called Man the Hunter, and it did exactly what its title promised. It put hunting at the center of human evolution. Big brains, language, cooperation, tools, all of it downstream of men going out after meat. It was enormously influential. It was also built on a very thin foundation, which is that the people studying foragers were mostly men, and the people they found easiest to interview were mostly men. Then somebody counted the calories. In warm climates, the food that actually keeps a group alive is not the spectacular kill. It is the reliable stuff. Roots, tubers, nuts, seeds, fruit, small game, honey. Hunting large animals is thrilling, and it is also wildly unreliable. A Hadza hunter in Tanzania can go out day after day and come back with nothing at all. The plant food arrives every day, and in many of these societies, that is the majority of what everyone eats. In 2023, a team went further and pulled together the records of 63 foraging societies. In most of them, women hunted. Not as a rare exception. As part of the ordinary run of things, sometimes with dogs, sometimes with different weapons, sometimes with a child on their back. That study has been criticized, and fairly, for how loosely it counted hunting. So take the careful version rather than the dramatic one. The picture is not reversed. It is blurred. The line was real, and it was nothing like a wall. And here is the part that gets left out of both versions. Look at who is feeding the children. Among the Hadza, some of the most productive foragers in the whole group are the older women. Grandmothers. Long past childbearing, digging deep tubers, hours a day, feeding grandchildren who have been weaned but cannot yet feed themselves. This is genuinely strange. Almost no mammal lives long past its own fertility. Human women routinely live for decades after it. Kristen Hawkes argued that those decades are not a leftover. They are the point. A grandmother who feeds a weaned child lets her daughter have the next baby sooner. Groups with grandmothers grow faster, which would mean that a good part of the reason humans live as long as we do is old women digging roots. And under those conditions, there is not very much to control, because there is not very much to own. You carry what you can carry. Food gets shared out because otherwise it rots. Research on foragers today finds that when both partners have equal say in where the group camps, people end up living among unrelated neighbors instead of just relatives, which is exactly the condition our whole cooperative streak seems to need. Then the food stopped moving. About 12,000 years ago, people began to farm, and everything reorganized itself around one new fact. Grain can be stored. Before we get to what that did to society, look at what it did to women's bodies, because somebody actually measured it. A researcher at Cambridge took the arm and leg bones of Central European women from the first 5,500 years of farming and compared them against modern women. Sedentary students, runners, footballers, and the university rowing team, who train around 20 hours a week. On legs, the prehistoric women lost. On arms, they beat the rowers by as much as 16%. These were some of the strongest arms ever measured on any group of women anywhere, and they were built by grinding grain. Kneeling at a stone, pushing another stone back and forth for hours, every day, for a lifetime. Sit with that, because it takes the usual explanation apart on its own. Their arms were stronger than an elite athlete's. The constraint on their lives was never strength. It was that the task kept them kneeling in one place. Now the storage. A pile of grain is the first thing in human history genuinely worth guarding. It does not rot in a season. It can be counted, defended, and handed down. And the moment something can be handed down, one question becomes economically enormous. Handed down to who exactly? Property that outlives you needs heirs. Heirs need certainty. And certainty about fatherhood runs directly through control of women. Not because anyone sat down and reasoned it out. Because the societies that policed it hardest were the ones whose wealth stayed concentrated across generations, and those were the societies that grew. Then came the tool. Some early farming used the hoe. You work it standing up in short bursts, and you can put it down and pick it up again around everything else you have to do. And some use the plow, which needs sustained grip strength, real upper body power, and control of a large animal that can kill you. 3 economists tested whether that difference left a mark. They mapped which societies historically farmed with the plow, and then looked at attitudes and female employment today. Plow societies are measurably less equal. Now, thousands of years later. And the strangest part of the finding is that it follows people. The children of migrants from plow regions, born and raised somewhere else entirely, still hold more traditional views on average than the children of migrants from hoe regions. The tool is long gone. The belief outlived it by millennia. Around 3,000 years ago, it started getting written down. Assyrian law required free women to veil in public and forbade enslaved women from doing it on pain of having their ears cut off. Read that twice because it tells you what the rule was actually for. It was not about modesty. It was a uniform. It marked which women belonged to which men. And the pressure came from underneath as well. Foragers space births around 4 years apart because a mother can only carry one small child at a time, and breastfeeding holds off the next pregnancy. Settle down, add grain porridge, wean earlier, and that gap closes to something nearer 2. More children. Less movement. A house that now contains most of the work. Nothing had changed about what a woman's body could do. What changed is that the food now had to be guarded and the land had to be inherited, and both of those things ran straight through her. Which brings us to the machines. If the gate was built by tools that rewarded grip strength, then the gate begins to open the moment the tools stop caring about it. The first place that happened was the textile mill, and it was not liberation. It was long hours, dangerous machinery, and terrible pay, and a great deal of that workforce was women and children. But it was paid. It was outside the house, and it was not controlled by a husband or a father in the same direct way. The economist Claudia Golden, who won the Nobel for this work in 2023, found something most people get backwards about what happened next. Women's participation in paid work did not simply climb. It fell first. When production moved out of the household and into factories, married women working became stigmatized in a way it never had been on a family farm. The line drops through early industrialization, bottoms out, and only then starts to rise. It is a U, not a ramp, which means the 1950s housewife, the image people reach for when they say traditional, is not the deep past at all. She is the bottom of a curve. A brief, unusually rich moment, mistaken ever since for the natural state of things. Then the curve breaks upward, and Golden's explanation for why is very specific. The contraceptive pill, not because of sex, because of time. Becoming a doctor or a lawyer means committing 5 to 10 years before you earn anything real. That commitment only makes sense if you can be reasonably sure the next decade is yours to plan. When young unmarried women got reliable access, the age of first marriage rose, and enrollment in long professional degrees rose with it almost immediately. Which brings us to now, and to the honest version of where the gap actually sits. In most rich countries, it is no longer mainly about being kept out. Women now outnumber men in higher education across most of the developed world. Golden's finding is that what remains is largely about hours. Certain careers pay disproportionately for being permanently available. The 60-hour week. The call at 9 at night. Two parents usually cannot both hold that job, so one of them takes the flexible one. The gap does not open at hiring. It opens at the first child. And globally, women still do more than 3 times as much unpaid care work as men. That work has not been redistributed. It has been made invisible by not being paid for. So the constraint moved. From the plow to the clock. Here is what I find genuinely strange about all of it. Every single one of these arrangements felt like nature to the people living inside it. The foragers were not thinking about it at all. The farmers carved it into law. The Victorians called it delicacy and believed they were being kind. We call it choice, and we mean it. Not one of them was biology speaking. Each one was a technology speaking and taking a very long time to stop. Which brings me back to that grave in the Andes. A girl was buried 9,000 years ago with the tools of her life laid carefully around her. And a room full of intelligent, careful people looked at that kit and saw a man, because that is what their own century had trained their eyes to do. They were not being stupid. They were being ordinary. So the question is not whether we still do that. We do. It is what we are looking straight at right now with total confidence that somebody in 200 years is going to find obvious. That is all for this one. If it made you think differently, subscribe. There is a new one every week. Tell me what to pull apart next.